under construction, and then that would allow them to keep $25 million to implement the results of that study. So we'll build that into the next update. Category 6 is for 680 and Highway 24, and this is to complete the carpool lanes and express lane network, implement the recommendations from the recently completed transit study, and to make improvements on the 680-24 interchange that are being scoped right now under a joint MTC and ccta study. The funding would also be used for interchange improvements on both 680 and 24. I will note that we're getting a strong push from many fronts, business community and others, to increase funding in this category to $200 million. So I don't know that we will do that in the next draft, but we'll be able, certainly something we'll continue to discuss. Category 7 is Highway 4 and 242. And I just want to report there's 2 efforts underway to inform how the funding would be used in this category. The first is the State Route 4 Integrated Corridor Mobility Project that we're undertaking, funded from grants from the U.S. DOT, and there's a small amount of Measure J available on the project, and this would augment that. We're in the process now of coordinating that project with planning for operational improvements over Willow Pass project. So those improvements were identified through the corridor system management plan that was developed when we were widening Highway 4. So we're in a scoping process for that, and I think there's some really exciting opportunities to use both the technology and the ICM and some spot improvements, some infrastructure improvements to take care of some of the problem that those of you that travel over Willow Pass in the morning are experiencing. Category 6 is Julie's favorite category. It's 684 interchange. Okay. We'll take a vote, at least 3. And I think we know that's about a $400 million project, so this is just a down payment on that total cost. The funding level in here would allow us to construct the first phase of the interchange that's almost fully designed. It's the project that lost funding through the STIP process, and then we'd be able to do some additional planning for some of the later phases. Category 9 is East County Corridor. I'm sure you'll hear many speakers on this topic tonight. The initial draft TEP we call it the Byron Highway and the proposed 239 Tri-Lane Corridor and the Vasco Corridor. I've seen materials where some folks are suggesting we should call out the James Donlin project in this category as well. The initial draft here has language proposed for safeguards to pick the best project, and a lot of references to appropriate mitigation. So that's a lot of the discussion on this project. I'm sure that's the resolution of this funding and this project is something that I don't expect we'll have resolved by the end of March. Category 10 is proposed advanced mitigation program. The language in the document that you see, it's very similar to the language that was in San Diego's Transnet measure. A couple meetings ago, Gary Gallegos was here and talked about his program and the overwhelming success that they've had in advanced mitigations from their most recent measure. So as I've stated before, I'm working with a group to define this program. Getting a little concerned on the pace of the effort here, but one thing I think we all need to recognize, the whole premise or foundation of advanced mitigation is based on trust. So this will require that we have some trust that the pilot program gets defined, likely not to be defined by May, will be defined or should be defined by November. So we're going to have to find some language that allows us to bridge between having the final TEP and then really knowing what we're going to be able to implement prior to the election. So we'll need to keep a watch on this category. Category 12, non-rail transit enhancements. We talked about this at our meeting on February 17th. Probably hear a lot of comments on this as well. First, you're going to hear that the name needs to include the word bus, and so we've been working to include the name or the word bus in both the name and the description of the category. But we do still feel very strongly that we want to keep the language flexible enough to adopt the evolution that is likely to occur in public transportation over the next 25 years. If you recall, if you were here on February 17th, you've heard Rick Ramos here speak to that point. So we think it's very important. Second comment you're likely to hear is the funding level. The RTPCs originally requested $219 million, which is a little above what we showed here. As I mentioned, WICTAC has already requested an additional $30 million. I think TransPAC may be considering some additional funding here. You may hear speakers talk about trying to achieve 15-minute headways for the major routes. One of the documents we discussed at EPAC, I don't recall if it ever came here, was transit operators provided an estimate that that would take roughly $1 billion to get to 15-minute headways. So it's something we're going to have to work on. You know, what's the right amount of funding and the right amount of service? So something somewhere in between, I'm sure. Category 12 is transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. Elaine just spoke with that. I think this is the one category where we haven't heard anything negative, so I'm happy to report that. Except we probably need to look at some additional funding. The language that you're reading here needs to be cleaned up to be similar to some of the other categories. So really this one, it's cleaning up the verbiage, trying to find a way to figure out what's the right funding. The RTPCs requested $105 million. We put a lower number, maybe it's a little too low, recognizing that if we implement the mobility management strategies, we're going to get some efficiencies, and that efficiency could actually spill over into the existing Measure J funding. Category 13, Safe Transportation for Children. This really just expands the very popular Measure J programs. RTPC's requested $77 million. I'm sure as they go through their review, they'll probably come back with some requests to increase that. 14, intercity rail and ferries. We've combined this category. Originally came in from the RTPC, a certain amount of funding for rail, a certain amount of money for ferries. All the cities that currently have an intercity rail stop are also planning ferry. So we think it makes a lot of sense if by combining this and providing some flexibility, if for example, if the ferries don't get off the ground, probably not a good metaphor, but the funding could be used in the intercity rail or vice versa. So I think you may get some comments about that, the feasibility of some of the ferry lines, but we're trying to address that by having this flexibility between rail and ferry. Pedestrian bike trail facilities are very much similar to Measure J. The only comment we're really getting on that is try to find a way to increase the funding on that category. 16, this is a proposed new funding category intended to stimulate production of housing or the production of jobs with the intent of eliminating long commutes and particularly commutes outside of the county. We discussed this on February 3rd special meeting. Kind of turning into a little bit of a love it or hate it category. Probably be a stretch to say the city managers love it, but they do like the fact that this is an idea to provide additional funding for local funding to improve cities. Again, attachment B of the next item, 1.3, Bay Area Council, BIA, East Bay Leadership Council letter opines that this carrot approach just doesn't work. And I know the Board of Supervisors talked about this a little bit. I think I really like the comment and the intent of the program. I want some additional clarification on the words, but there is a concern that it might just get watered down and be a pass-through program. So I think that's some of the comments from the board and some of the comments from Bay Area Council, BIA, and East Bay Leadership Council are a little bit similar, that if we're going to have this program, we need to find something that really works, and there needs to be some teeth to it. So I'm sure this will continue to be an open dialogue for well past March. Innovative Transportation Technology Connected Communities Program. This really combines three concepts. One is, we want to develop, we want a program that we can use as seed funding, hopefully leverage funding to develop and demonstrate transportation innovations through real-world applications. The funding amount would be less than $1 million a year, and hopefully we could leverage those funds to deploy new technology. And the idea here is to test these innovations in real-world situations. And for the pilots that work, they would get funded out of another category. Just not a lot of funding here, so it's really kind of a revolving set of innovations that we could deploy, see what works, and then roll that out through funding and other programs. B is relatively simple, geared towards a similar size pot, geared towards funding activities where the primary purpose is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then C is implement connected transportation solutions. When Randy talks here, you hear the word smart city application. They didn't really want to use that word because not everybody lives in a city. So trying to come up with a more generic term, but it's really using this small amount of fund to implement the smart city concepts. And the amount of funding here, that really doesn't require a lot. So we think there's enough here where combined with other funds we're likely to leverage with this. Every city or town that wants to participate should be able to participate with the level of funding in here. Category 1820, that's planning and admin. Those are similar to Measure J. We're proposing that the funding for the planning category, we could do that at a lower amount since there's 17 years of overlap between Measure J and this program. And then category 19 is not a real category. This is to give the RTPC room to add funding levels. WCTAC's already done some of that. In fact, WCTAC's proposing that we use part of this to bring back sub-regional needs program. So that's a small pot of money that remains flexible to address unknown future needs. It's similar to the sub-regional need category in Measure J. And I'm sure other RTPCs will make recommendations either for additional to boost funding in different categories here or potentially for other purposes. So I'm almost done here. If we turn to the next several pages, 13 to 20, this is a restatement, actually word for word, of the growth management program and its attachment A, the principles of agreement for establishing the urban limit line. The urban limit line discussion will be later on the agenda. We do know we need to update the growth management program. We'll have, well, the goal is that we'll have a version for you to look at next week. That might be a little bit of a stretch. As you know, through our discussions here, there's quite a bit of negotiation for changes that should occur in that section. We've noted some of these in the notes on the margin on the page. So many outstanding issues. So the next version is likely to include some proposals for additional checklist requirements, agricultural protections, maybe a few other items. So ultimately, we need to get there. If we get there by next week, that's something I'm not ready to commit to right now, but that's our intent. Pages 21 and 22 are the complete streets policy. Work's been continuing on that over the next week. So this is a new section. The comment I'd like to make right now is this section is being completely rewritten. That was completed, I believe, yesterday. So you'll see a complete new section on that. So if you have any comments on the complete streets policy, you can give us some direction if you'd like. But you'll see a complete new version next week that's been worked out with Dave Campbell, among others. I've already discussed the Regional Advanced Mitigation Program, which is on page 23. That obviously will get some additional work as we go through the pilot. The governing structure, pages 24 through 26, and implementing guidelines. These, again, are new sections, and we'll cover those under item 1.5 later in the agenda. So that was a quick walkthrough. Happy to answer any questions. Actually, I think I'm going to turn it over to Bill before we get to that point. And he's going to cover item 1.3, which is the summary and highlight of the comments that we've received that I haven't talked about.
Thank you, Ross. Has this been passed down?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. We've not been without a few comments on the draft. It's an understatement. So our focus in this initial draft, as Ross indicated, was released and presented to the EPAC group. We've had two good meetings of that group and received a lot of comments. And I'm not going to try to go through the comments, but starting on page 1.3.1 and following, there's a whole series of comments. And what we've been trying to do, and I think fairly successfully, is to just document and acknowledge all of the comments being received and this chart is a work in progress. We expect to add to it with comments we may receive tonight and in other venues. And we are going to start populating the response column, and responses may be as simple as you're going to see some changed language in version 2 or others. But so that's the real approach. And without going into a lot of detail on the kinds of comments, up on the screen here is a little poll that we did with the EPAC at the last meeting, because what we are trying to do is get a sense of the group as a whole, what their priorities were, and then we ask a couple kind of leading questions, what would you see getting more funding and what would you see getting less funding? And I think what we did is we proved we have a diverse group. We have a diverse group of folks representing a variety of perspectives, and I would ask you to just look at this. The items along the bottom are basically the elements of the expenditure plan draft, and you can see by the height of the bars the importance of the various issues. No real surprises other than for the most part, everybody has some favorite projects, and everybody likes, various pieces of the project. So I think what it did is validated in my mind, in our mind, I think, that we've got a good, diverse group of folks. If you look at the next 2 pages, okay, you've got it. Yeah, the next page 2 on this handout, and the one that's on the screen, really shows up. Okay, well, I'll go through a little bit of the highlights then. What this is the 5 categories that would deserve greater funding, and the height of the bar indicates that. And the highest one was transportation for seniors and people with disabilities, followed by pedestrians and bike trail facilities, and the advanced mitigation program, and traffic flow in the 680 corridor. And those are the ones that, that Ross has mentioned. And people can take a look at this later. There's copies we can make available. And then on the last page, we ask the other side of the equation, well, what funding categories would you suggest that has less funding? And given the fact that this was a stakeholder group made up of other than local agency officials, they clearly identified local street and road maintenance as a pot of money. And it's not a surprise in terms of how these comments were received. The rest of it is pretty much spread across the board. There's really there's nothing else that really stands out. You can talk, a little bit about non-rail transit, the East County corridor, intercity rail, again, pedestrian bike facilities. That was a high and a low, and then regional choice. So that just gives you a snapshot. It's not scientific in any way. We have a lot of comments. We're processing those comments, and we intend to reflect a number of them, a lot of them, and we're going to acknowledge all of them next week at your meeting, and we're going to incorporate a lot of updates, changes, or clarification based on this comment. So unless there's questions, that's...
Well, and I think, again, this illustrates the challenge we have here. Whoops, get it going the right direction. Now I'm stuck. So what needs more funding? We see a lot of activity. I think I have it here. Where it comes from, that's the hard part. Not many people can identify where we cut to add funding. So I think that shows EPAC has the same view. I think as probably a lot of us do, as a lot of categories deserve more funding, but where do we get it? All right, Chair, we'd like to turn it back to you.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is I have a number of speaker slips for a combination of items 2 and 3. So I would like to go through those, and as I call your name, remember that we're asking everyone to limit their comments this evening to 2 minutes. So I'd like to start with Vin Rover.
Chair Tatson, if I can just clarify.
Yes.
That if someone is speaking on both item 1.2 and 1.3, that they would get 4 minutes. But if they were only speaking on one item, they would get 2, since we agendized them as separate items.
Well, I would actually hope they could limit their comments to 2 minutes for the combination. I probably have 30 speaker slips here. So, all right. So, Mr. Rover, welcome.
Good evening. Vin Rover, 2215 Spyglass Drive in Brentwood. I just want to make a couple of comments. Won't take the 2 minutes. We just want to emphasize for the economic development of East Contra Costa the importance of State Route 239. And in addition, we'd like to see the Far East BART station eventually, but we don't want to be left out there in the cold as a cul-de-sac for any longer. We want to step up and be a vibrant community, and we feel that we need these things to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Pifo. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Chair Tatson, as was expressed at our Highway 160 on and off-ramp connector grand opening recently, Mr. Hudson was there. I am proud and deeply appreciative of all of you and your entire team for the delivery of another project, not only on time, but my personal favorite, under budget. We can now drive north and south from the John A. Nidgidley Bridge, also known as the Antioch Bridge, from Far East County without having to circumnavigate the cities of Oakley and Antioch. The culmination of all of the Highway 4 projects coming together is over $1 billion. So amazing and so much appreciated, and we appreciate every single penny of it, and thank you all for your leadership. Excuse me. Your leadership has been strong for East County projects, and I literally beg you to not lose focus regarding the newly released transportation expenditure plan. We need to be very careful about where we put our precious resources that will serve the most taxpayers and where we can get the biggest bang for our limited buck. The items that East County voters will support are funding for the extension of BART into Far East Contra Costa. Pittsburgh and Antioch are awesome stations, but they're not the end of the line. We need to continue important safety improvements to Vasco Road, an important commute route for thousands. We need roadways and highways that safely serve the majority of our residents and that provide efficient movement of goods, vehicles, and yes, even cyclists. Far East County residents have been paying into a transportation system that brought improvements to other areas of the county and region like BART, I-80, I-680, I-24, and the Caldecott Tunnel, all excellent projects, by the way, but we've only begun to see the infrastructure we need out in Far East County. I'm pleased the TEP discussion includes 5% for improvements in the East County corridor. This will help to fund progress on TriLink or State Route 239 project, the Brentwood to Tracy route, and also construction of the James Donlin extension. People who do not live out there may not realize we have big rigs moving through East County and traveling across one-way bridges to the Central Valley and Interstate 5. Dave, you're out there a lot. You know what those roads and bridges look like. The 239 route is a critical corridor for goods movement that will bring jobs to where we live and benefit the entire county and region and complement the county's Northern Waterfront Economic Development Initiative. I'm pleased that the draft does not attempt to meddle with the urban limit line. During the development of Measure J, every single stakeholder compromised, and the result was a strong urban limit line with delineation of where growth shall and shall not occur. This has worked, and there has been no abuse of the urban limit line as it's been written and supported by the voters. I encourage you to support the status quo. I believe what we have here will continue to improve mobility in the county, although we could do better for our senior population, and we should. The current plan protects open space, supports a better jobs environment so more people can live where they work, allows for enhanced quality of life benefits for families, achieves reductions in greenhouse gases that come when people are not idling in traffic and goods are actually moving. Less time in traffic and congestion means more time we have with our families. Finally, and separate from the expenditure plan, I'm hearing that the state has reneged funds previously promised to the I-684 interchange. The threat is a giant step backwards and our collective improvements to improve mobility. I'll do whatever I can to help you gain those dollars back. As I said earlier, thank you again for your efforts to bring dramatically improved commute times and roadway safety for the 130,000 commuters who travel along State Route 4. Over $1 billion, and we again appreciate every single penny. But we need to be represented in the new measure in order for those that I represent to see direct benefit to Far East County projects that are important and be able to support it. Lastly, you've seen important information about our proposed Marsh Creek multi-use trail to link pedestrian access, bicycle and pedestrian access between Clayton and Brentwood. This is an obviously complex proposal, but it's important enough for representation in your plan, and I believe we have it there. Again, thank you for all of your hard work and the time you're investing in this effort. Don't forget us out in Far East County. Thank you so much.
So our next speaker is Sal Evela, followed by Juan Pablo Galvan. I haven't counted, but over 30. And it keeps growing. So how many people are in the room? All right.
Thank you, Chair
Welcome.
and members of the board. My name is Sal Evela. I'm a council member in Pittsburgh, chairman of the East Contra Costa Habitat Conservancy Plan, and a board member of Transplan and the East Contra Costa Fee and Finance Authority. I, as well as several other electeds, also applaud this board for their leadership and what they've done for supporting transportation in eastern Contra Costa County. However, tonight I have to express a few concerns that we have regarding what we've seen thus far with the draft TEP. The City of Pittsburgh vehemently opposes further modifications and or additional requirements to the growth management plan that would be in conjunction with our ability to receive our return to source funds. We do not feel it was ever the intention of CCTA at any time or any other agency to regulate land use decisions at the local level, some of which have been expressed through the draft comments. In our opinion, there are several changes which we feel, as a city, are pushing the legal limits of the authority under this proposed measure. Some of these recommendations appear to violate a settlement agreement that Pittsburgh has with Transplan and ECRFA, which some of you were very instrumental in bringing Pittsburgh back to the table. Pittsburgh has been a partner with agencies such as BART, where we were one of the first cities to fund 50% of our own BART station. We have a specific plan around our TOD village promoting livable and walkable communities to get people out of their cars. But at the same time, we want to control our own land use decisions. Let me be clear. Pittsburgh intends to use its local fees and its regional fees to build the James Donnellan extension. In our opinion, certain stakeholders and certain stakeholder groups are going way too far in their recommendations to our local land use control. I am personally prepared, if need be, on behalf of my community and the numerous calls I have received, to fight this measure at the ballot box if these possible illegal modifications make it all the way to the ballot measure. If they don't, and if it's fair and balanced and preserves local control, we're going to continue to be an advocate, as we have been and as we have demonstrated. My constituents in the city of Pittsburgh expect that certain improvements are going to be built, and they expect that they could go to their city council for their local land use control and decisions. I respectfully submit these comments. Again, applaud the leadership of this board, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if I could just ask, Ross, are the comments we received tonight going to be included in updates to the comment log?
Yeah, that would be the intent,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you.
A summary and synthesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not word for word, okay. Mr. Galvan, followed by Debbie Toth, and then followed by Claire Linder. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Juan Pablo Galvan, Land Use Planner for Save Mount Diablo. Let me be clear. The idea that a 1970s-era project, such as the James Donnellan Boulevard extension, can solve the transportation problems of 2016, 2025, and 2035 is absurd. Let me be clear. Serious consideration of a project that, when evaluated against region-wide criteria that have been adopted by many planning agencies in this area, reviewed during an EPAC meeting,